Hi everyone, it's time for a really big how-to lesson on bake-alongs. I am making profiteroles au craquelin. I'll walk you through all the steps to make that crispy sweet topping that you bake onto a traditional choux paste based profiterole. Oh, fill it with whatever you want. It is going to be delicious. You're going to be so proud of yourself once you've mastered making profiteroles au craquelin. The first part of this recipe is to make the craquelin dough. So it's a thin, sweet wafer cookie that you place the raw dough disc on top of the piped choux paste and then bake everything together. It's a simple little preparation, which is why I find using a mini chopper is sufficient, or you can also mix the dough easily together by hand. I've got my softened butter. In you go. And 2 types of sugar, a little light brown sugar and a little regular granulated sugar. I might as well add my vanilla at the same time, and I'll just give this a little blitz to combine everything. All right, when you see it starting to come together, or if you're doing it by hand, when the sugar and the butter come together, then you simply add your flour. I treat craquelin as flavor neutral. It's such a small component of a profiterole. It's the filling where the flavor resides, so I don't bother beyond the little vanilla. You could add a little zest or a pinch of cinnamon if you had a related flavor in your filling, but there's really no need here. It depends on the tool you're using. Sometimes it won't, if you're using a chopper, come together within the bowl, but if you can pick up some of the crumbs and bring them together with your hand, then you know you are well mixed and ready to roll, literally. Just pop the blade out here. And I'll just finish bringing the dough together by hand. True to a professional baker's kitchen, each of the components in profiteroles au craquelin can be made ahead of time. So in a baking kitchen, in a professional kitchen, you would make big batches of the craquelin, roll it out, have it ready to go, and then you bake off what you need each day. If you want to get ahead of this, you can shape your craquelin dough into a disc, wrap it, chill it or freeze it. Just pull it out a little bit before you want to roll it because it is easier to handle when it is slightly soft. But when it comes time to cut the little rounds to place on each profiterole before you bake it, I find it easier to fit in my freezer if I break the dough into 3 pieces and then roll them. That way, they take up less space. So you want to roll your craquelin dough between sheets of parchment. We don't want to add extra flour to the dough itself. And it rolls easily. I find using these 9-inch parchment rounds is easy because it's easy to gauge how thinly I should roll it when it almost reaches the edges of the parchment. Almost. So I'm trying to roll this as thin as possible, about 1/8 of an inch thick. Let's take a look. Yeah, it comes away easily. It will be delicate and a bit fragile, but that's thin enough. And now I'll continue rolling. Actually, while I'm rolling, let's talk a minute about coloring your craquelin, because you can see now it's just a neutral, natural beige color, and it turns a nice, even golden brown when you bake your profiterole. Whoops, forgot the parchment on top. So craquelin takes food coloring very easily. If you're making a raspberry filling for your profiterole, to tint your craquelin, a nice rose pink would be beautiful. You could tint it, I have made a pistachio cream filling and tinted it my craquelin green. I've made a saffron white chocolate filling and tinted my craquelin yellow. So really it is up to you. Just note that because of the beige color, because craquelin has the brown sugar in it, a subtle addition of color can sometimes get lost. So it's one place. Don't be afraid to be bold when it comes to your coloring if that's the direction you choose to go. I wanted to show you what this looks like in its natural state, so then you can decide. Oh, and one last tip. Recipes like this have so many little extra tips to include, and I'm happy to share them with you. If you want to make a chocolate craquelin, pull out 2 tablespoons of the cocoa from the flour measurement. I spoiled the surprise. To make a chocolate craquelin dough, measure out your flour, pull out 2 tablespoons of the flour and replace it with 2 tablespoons of cocoa, and that will give you a nice, rich, dark, cocoa-colored craquelin. I think I can go a little thinner on that. Just a little bit. And now for the last of the 3 pieces. If you've never seen how craquelin has been, if you've never seen before how craquelin is made, it's a bit surprising how simple it is. It's not that complicated, but it makes such a difference, and it gives your profiteroles such an elegant look. You can do the same to eclairs too, basically any choux paste preparation. Let's take a look. Almost there. Okay. So to make these easier to cut, I'm going to pop them in the freezer while I make my choux paste. All right, now to make one of my favorite pastries. Seriously, it is so fulfilling to make choux paste and pipe it into the shapes and watch it double, triple, quadruple in size in the oven. So unlike pie dough or sweet dough or puff pastry that is a dense dough that's rolled, choux paste you work with while it's warm, and it really does have a softer consistency to it. So what I have to do is heat up my liquids. I have a combination of milk and water, and you'll see if you start looking at different choux paste recipes, some will have more milk than water and others will have more water than milk, or even all water. And the water can really make a difference in how crisp your profiteroles or eclairs bake up, depending on what you're doing with your choux paste, of course. I favor more water than milk, but I do like a bit of milk in there for the tenderness of the choux paste. I add just a touch of sugar, a little salt, and my butter. So now I'm going to bring this up to a simmer, just until it starts just barely bubbling a little bit. But you want to have your other ingredients ready. So I've got my flour measured. That's going to get stirred into the liquid. And I have my eggs on reserve. So 4 large eggs, and they're at room temperature. This is very important because we're going to be adding them to our hot paste base. Now that I've got a simmer, I can add my flour all at once, stir quickly. I want to combine this, turn this into a thick paste. And you want to give the flour a moment to cook out. And it's hydrating right now, which means the protein is developing. If you've ever made cinnamon buns using the Tangzong method, where you make this cooked flour water paste, it's more liquidy than this. It's the same principle. We want to give our paste structure so that it holds in the air when it hits the heat of the oven. There we go. It's cleaning the sides of the pot. I'm making sure there are no floury lumps and that the paste cleans the pot easily, so I can lift it out in one big piece. Pop that off. And you want to have your mixer ready, or you can use electric beaters. When I first went to cooking school, I was taught to make choux paste by hand. And that is a good exercise in what not to do. It takes so much elbow grease to mix choux paste by hand. I'm so glad we don't have to do that anymore. Now, this is a very important step, and if it's your first time making choux paste, don't skip this step. We actually have to blow off some of the steam in the choux paste. Otherwise, look at that steam coming off of that. That's excess moisture that if we didn't do this step, beating your paste base for a minute or so until you see this steam start to disappear, you would have profiteroles that are too wet and too heavy, and you wouldn't get the volume that you want, because what we want out of a profiterole is a crisp shell with a hollow center. An easy step and such a critical one. While that's mixing, I've got my 4 whole eggs, and I like to give them a little whisk first. That way it's easier to add them in small increments to the dough. You add the eggs a little at a time. There's another reason to let this cool down for a moment, because if you add your eggs to a boiling hot paste, it'll start cooking the eggs, and then they won't have any room to move when they hit the heat of the oven. Okay, I've just got mere wisps of steam now, so I can start adding the egg. It's a moderate speed. And before you add more egg, let the last addition fully work its way in. Sure it's nice and smooth. And that strange mixture is your choux paste. And this is a dough you want to work with while it's still warm. It can cool to room temperature, so I don't want you to worry if with your oven you have to bake your choux pastry in batches. It's not going to be compromised. But definitely you want to work with this freshly made. So it's nice and soft and pliable. Just making sure it's smooth right from top to bottom. It's also just such a gratifying dough to play with. I really do love it. Okay, now to get yourself ready for the piping stage. For this recipe, I'm making 48 profiteroles, so you'll need 2 baking trays lined with parchment, I've got my piping bag fitted with a large plain tip. This is 1/2 inch across. You can do a star tip, of course, but putting the craquelin is going to hide any detail of the profiterole, so it's not really needed here. All right. Now, the first thing I do before I even start piping is, because of the paste consistency of the choux, if I start piping, it's going to pull up the parchment. So I just pipe a couple of dots on my tray, and that locks the parchment in place. And then I start piping. So I'm going to get 24 per tray, so I'll do 4 by 6. And a little tip when it comes to piping your choux paste, you want to hold your piping tip basically at the top of where you want to stop piping your little profiterole. So the temptation sometimes is to hold the tip too low to the tray, and you'll end up with the paste spreading out instead of up. Now I can continue on. And an exercise like this is why baking with kids is so great, because it's applied math and science, and then you get something sweet and delicious at the end. So whether it's calculating how to fit 24 evenly spaced profiteroles on your tray, the measurements, doubling a recipe, cutting a recipe in half, so many different elements. All right. Now, even though I'm putting a craquelin disc on top of each profiterole, if you wanted to, you could just bake them up without it. 2 things you need to do. You notice how my choux paste has nice little kisses at the top, little points. You don't want to bake your profiterole with that, because that point will stay in place and burn before the rest of the little pastry has baked. So dip your finger in cool water and you just press down on it. Here, I can just show you one. Whoop, to make it disappear. And then your profiterole will rise easily. Baking them without the craquelin, you'll want to put an egg wash on. So just whisk an egg with a tablespoon of water and brush the tops. That way you get an even browning. And they still will bake up hollow, crisp on the outside. If you want to make a French little treat called a chouquette, do that step with the egg wash and sprinkle it with baker's sugar. It's like a soufflé sugar. And they'll become crispy with just a hint of sweetness, and you pop them in your mouth and, well, they're filled with air. So they're just an easy little sweet treat. These are ready to top with the craquelin, which I'll grab from the freezer. one layer at a time. The dough is easier to handle while it's frozen, or at least chilled. So don't worry about keeping it in the freezer. When you look at my choux pipings, they're about an inch and a quarter wide. So I'm using a 1.5 inch round cookie cutter. So that way, when the craquelin disc is placed on top and then bakes, it sort of, as the profiterole bakes up, the craquelin melts and covers it and develops that crackle and crust at the same time. And you just set each disc gently on top. You can use this technique if you're making eclairs as well. You just need a longer cutter, slightly larger than the length of your eclairs that you're piping. Any little scraps can be saved and re-rolled. There we go. These are now ready for the oven. What's different about baking profiteroles with a craquelin topping is you bake them at a moderate oven, 350 Fahrenheit, 180 Celsius, and that's because of the sugar content in the craquelin itself. Typically, you bake eclair or profiterole, you bake choux paste at a high temperature, more like 400 degrees. So what I do is I pop these in the oven, I set the timer for 20 minutes. Then what I do, I don't change the oven temperature, but I open the oven door for 15 seconds. This lets out moisture, any steam the profiteroles let out. Then I close the oven door, still leave the oven at 350, and then I bake them for another 10 to 15 minutes. When they're an even golden brown, brown on top, basically, if you pick one up, it should be light as air. Then you know they're fully cooked. And now it's time for assembly. Look at the beautiful profiteroles with the craquelin topping, but you still can see the choux paste on the sides. They're light as could be, so I know they're hollow, and now they're ready to be filled. If you are making these ahead of time, it's best to freeze them unfilled, and then you can pull them out. And I like to pop them in the oven, more a 300-degree oven, 150 Celsius, for just a couple of minutes, just to dry them out and make sure they're nice and crisp before you fill them. To fill them, I have a chocolate creme mousseline, which is simply a pastry cream. And you can see the full video for my pastry cream recipe right here on the channel. The link's right below. And what I do is while the pastry cream is warm, I add 3 ounces, 90 grams of couverture baking chocolate, and I melt in, instead of using my typical 60 grams of butter for a traditional pastry cream that I would use for a cake or a tart filling, I actually add 175 grams. This creme mousseline is thicker and richer, thanks to the butter, but it's more set, and I like that for a profiterole filling so it won't ooze out, even as say the temperature in the room warms up. It is my first choice for filling profiteroles. So you have a couple of options. If you have just a regular small plain tip to fill your profiteroles, you want to take a bamboo skewer, poke a hole in the bottom, open it up a little bit. That way your piping tip can fit inside and it can fill just until you feel resistance. I happen to have a donut filling piping tip, so it can insert into the profiterole and fill it all in one move. good enough to start. And so you pipe with the chocolate filling until you do feel the resistance when it starts filling up, and you can feel the weight of it. And sometimes it takes a try or two and you overfill it and it starts oozing out one side or the other, so you'll get the hang of it soon enough. Just checking my pressure gauge as I fill. There we go. Oh yeah, that's got a full dose of chocolate creme mousseline. Just like sauces in the cooking world, sauces in the baking world have derivatives. So a pastry cream is a fundamental sauce or filling, but when you add butter, like I did today, it's a creme mousseline. If I were to add gelatin while the pastry cream is warm and then fold in whipped cream, that would be a creme diplomat, a diplomat cream that almost sets up like a mousse. And if I were to take that same warm pastry cream, add gelatin, but then fold in whipped egg whites after it's cooled to room temperature, that is creme Choux, and that makes an airier filling for tarts and for cakes. It really is about matching your other textures in your desserts, and it makes you realize you have a lot of creativity in the kitchen when it comes to baking. I'll just do a few more of these. When I find a hole to fill the profiterole, I always look for a weak point in the profiterole where there's a slight crack. That way I know the pastry's tender, and also because it's easier to fill and it won't break through or burst through on another weaker point. I'm controlling where it goes. This will be my last one. I don't think you need to watch me fill 48 profiteroles, do you? I'll save that for later. And you can leave the profiteroles in their glory and let that crackling shine through, but I find even to highlight the detail a little bit, just the lightest dusting of icing sugar, not a full coating. We're not making jelly donuts. Really makes a difference. There we go. It highlights that beautiful crackle. And then you want to keep these in the fridge once they're filled. I tend to like to serve my filled profiteroles the day I fill them. Well, I was thinking I was going to make a croquembouche tower there, but I need the caramelized sugar for that. There is a video right here on the channel for croquembouche if you want to check it out. But now you've got what it takes to master making choux paste topped with that crispy sweet craquelin topping that really looks professional. I've shared my years of experience so that you can get in the kitchen, bake with confidence, and let me tell you, when you make something like profiteroles au craquelin, you will feel like a pro. I love you bakers, you're the best. I'll see you again for another bake-along recipe. Enjoy. Look at all that space for that chocolate filling. Did you hear the crunch? Just the right amount of crunch, but it's tender too. I'm glad I opted for a chocolate. I was in the mood for chocolate. Bye everyone.